All right, so you're diving deep into Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. You really want to uncover what he means, like beyond just the surface level, right? Judging by all the notes and excerpts you sent over.
It's funny you should say that about the surface level, because what's fascinating about Covey is he's not about quick fixes. This isn't a life hack kind of book. It's a complete paradigm shift he's advocating for.
And he mentions paradigms a lot, like a lot. Remember that optical illusion he uses with the young and old woman?
Right.
You see one or the other, but never both at the same time. Blew my mind a little the way our perception plays tricks, you know? Like maybe we're not always seeing the full picture.
Exactly. And that's the point of the illusion, right? Our paradigms, the mental models we use, they can limit us or liberate us, depending.
Okay.
Covey argues a lot of people, they're operating from a personality ethic. They're focused on surface techniques.
Okay, I'm seeing this.
But the true effectiveness, he says, it comes from character ethic.
Yeah.
It's got to be grounded in something deeper, timeless principles.
So it's like building a house on sand versus solid ground. You might get some initial results with the shortcuts, but
But it won't last.
exactly. Been there, done that, tried all the quick fix things, always ends up the same. Back to square one. But how do we even begin to build that? What was it? Character ethic.
It starts with understanding the power of proactivity. And I don't just mean taking initiative. It's bigger than that. It's recognizing we are in the driver's seat of our own lives.
Okay.
We have the power to choose.
Right, and that's where his whole circle of influence idea comes in, right? Focus your energy on what you can control, not all the stuff you can't.
Exactly.
He tells that great story about that executive, the one who basically achieved huge influence just by focusing on solutions, not blame. Imagine if we all did that.
Imagine the possibilities, right? That shift in focus, it's huge. Instead of blaming external factors, you're looking for solutions you can control.
So you become the architect of your own reality instead of the victim.
Exactly. We can't always choose our circumstances, that's true.
Right.
But we can always choose our response.
It's like that quote, the only thing that stands between you and your dream is the will to try and the belief that it is actually possible.
I like that. And you know what? That leads perfectly to Covey's next habit, beginning with the end in mind. Now,
Okay.
this one,
This one's a little out there, right?
it can sound a bit morbid.
Visualizing your own funeral. Not exactly a party.
Yeah, but that's not really what he's getting at, is it? It's not about dwelling on death. It's about intentionality.
Okay, I see that.
Identifying your core values now and then asking, are my actions aligning with the legacy I want to leave behind?
So it's less, I'm going to die someday, and more like, what do I want to be remembered for?
Yes. And then living a life that reflects those answers.
Like that story of Anwar Sadat.
Oh, powerful story.
He refused to accept the whole, we're going to be enemies with Israel forever narrative. He was like, nope, we're going to make peace. And then he did.
They're rewriting the script.
Exactly. If he can do that in the Middle East, what could we accomplish with this principle in our own lives, you know?
It's about realizing we have that power to clarify our values and then our actions. They become intentional steps toward those values.
Yeah.
And that's when you get extraordinary outcomes.
It's about living with intention, not just drifting through life on autopilot. So we've got these big picture goals.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we make sure we don't get so caught up in achieving them that we forget about, you know, right now? That's got to be where his PPC balance comes in.
You got it. The PPC balance. Production versus production capability. It's about recognizing that we can't just focus on the golden eggs of results without taking care of the goose that lays them.
Right.
If you want golden eggs.
Yep, take care of the goose.
Exactly.
It's like expecting a car to run without ever getting an oil change, right? You might get away with it for a little while, but eventually,
Yeah, breakdown.
total breakdown.
And we see this in our personal lives all the time, not just with work. People achieve success professionally,
Yeah.
but at what cost, right?
Yeah.
Health, relationship.
Your well-being, it's all connected. And it's not just about burnout, is it? It's deeper than that. I mean, Covey, he talks about how this PPC balance thing, it applies to our relationships too.
Right. Absolutely. Think about it. How many times have you been so focused on just getting things done, like checking things off the list, that
Yeah.
you forget about the connection part?
All the time. So easy to do.
It is. We get caught up in the urgent, But what about those small everyday moments that build real connection? Those are the deposits in the emotional bank account that
Yeah.
Covey talks about. And those matter a lot.
They do. And when you lose track of those, he says, every interaction, it's either a deposit or a withdrawal.
Right.
So like keeping commitments, even small ones,
Huge. That shows you're reliable.
someone people can count on, builds trust.
Yes. And then there's that story he tells
Yeah.
about the son and the yard work. Remember that one?
Yeah, yeah.
The father, he could have just ordered his son to do the work. But instead, they did it together, side by side. It wasn't just about getting the yard cleaned up. It was
Building that connection.
exactly.
Yeah.
And trust, they made a deposit in that relationship by working together.
It makes me think about, like, how often do we just try to tell people what to do instead of actually involving them, you know?
It's a constant challenge, isn't it, to shift from do this to let's do this together. But the impact, it's huge, just like that father and son.
For sure. And that actually reminds me of the next habit. Seek first to understand, then to be understood, which, like, that feels so crucial, especially when we're talking about those miscommunications that happen in relationships.
It's communication 101, right?
Yeah.
But it's so easy to forget.
Totally. We're hardwired for problem solving, I think. So someone tells us something and we jump right to
Giving advice.
exactly, or trying to fix it. But Covey's saying, hold on, pump the brakes. We've got to actually hear the other person first. Empathy.
Empathic listening. It's not about agreeing necessarily. It's about really getting where they're coming from before you offer solutions.
Harder than it sounds.
Oh, for sure. It takes practice. But he gives that great example, that father and the son arguing about school.
Oh, right, right.
The tension, it only started to ease up when the dad, he stopped giving advice and started really listening, trying to see it from his son's point of view.
I mean, how many arguments could we probably avoid if we all did that more? Just really listening, you know?
So many. And it's not just about what they're saying either. It's what might be left unsaid. That takes conscious effort to quiet your own thoughts and just be present with the other person.
It does. But when you do, when you feel truly heard, that changes things, doesn't it?
Creates trust, respect. It's the foundation for any kind of real connection or collaboration, which I guess brings us to Covey's concept of synergy.
Right, and synergy for him, that's not just teamwork, right? It's more than that.
Way more. He's talking about achieving outcomes that are bigger, better than what you could have gotten on your own. It's that 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing.
So how do you make that happen?
Well, it's about recognizing that everyone brings something unique to the table. Their own skills, experiences, perspectives.
And you value those differences.
You don't just tolerate them, you celebrate them. It's like that business meeting Covey describes, where they're supposed to just go through the motions, present the reports, whatever.
Yeah.
But then it shifted. And it turned into this amazing brainstorming session. Everyone's building off each other's ideas, and they reached this whole other level of creativity, all because the energy changed.
So it's like synergy, it's not just luck. You can actually set the stage for it to happen.
Exactly. When you've got that foundation of trust, the win-win thinking, the empathic listening, that's when synergy is most likely to emerge.
It's like you're priming the pump for those aha moments, those creative breakthroughs.
Precisely. You're creating the conditions for something amazing to happen.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But even with all this talk of effectiveness, achieving your goals, all that, Covey doesn't want us to get burned out, right? Like, he actually reminds us that we can't pour from an empty cup, which is where that last habit comes in, sharpen the saw.
It's the one we often neglect the most. But it's essential. You can't keep giving and giving without taking time to renew yourself. And he breaks it down into those 4 dimensions: physical, spiritual, mental, and social, emotional. All of them matter.
It's like we're being pulled in a million directions, right? Work, family, friends, our own goals. It's easy to feel like you're running on empty if you're not taking time to sharpen the saw, but where do we even start with that?
I think it starts with just acknowledging those 4 dimensions he talks about. Physical, spiritual, mental, social, emotional. They all need attention. And it's going to look different for everyone.
Right, because sharpening the saw, it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Exactly. For one person, physical renewal, that might be hitting the gym hard. For someone else, a walk in nature might do it, or gentle yoga class.
Totally. And then spiritual renewal, I mean, that could be meditation, prayer, even just spending time out in nature, like you said, just connecting with something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you, what makes you feel connected, grounded.
And mental renewal, that feels tougher than ever these days. I mean, there's always something vying for your attention, right? Social media, the news.
It's constant, which is why it's so important to be intentional about creating space for learning, for growth.
So reading a good book.
Yes. Or even listening to a podcast.
Oh, hey now.
Right. Or taking a class on something you're interested in. Just keep learning. Keep your mind engaged.
It's like exercise for your brain.
There you go.
And we can't forget about the social emotional side of things either. I mean, it's easy to think that just because you're scrolling through social media all day that you're connecting with people, but
It's not the same. It's not even close. Real social emotional renewal, it's about those face-to-face connections, spending time with the people who matter most to you, having real conversations.
being present.
Yes, exactly. Putting the phone down and actually being present in the moment.
Mhm.
That's where the good stuff happens.
I love that. And, you know, it strikes me that all these habits, they're not just standalone things, right? It's like they build on each other.
They do. It's an upward spiral. One habit supports the next.
It's a whole system. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the 7 habits, I'm curious what's really sticking with you. If you had to pick just one to focus on this week, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. And there's no right or wrong answer, of course. It's really about looking at your own life, your own situation, and asking, where do I feel most out of alignment? Where could even a small shift create a big impact?
It's about showing up as the best version of yourself for you and for the people around you.
Exactly. And remember, this whole journey of effectiveness, it's not about being perfect, it's about progress. Just keep moving forward, one step at a time.
Beautifully said. We hope this deep dive into Stephen Covey's 7 habits has given you some new insights, some things to think about, and maybe even a little motivation to make some positive changes in your own life.
You have the power within you. Don't forget that.
So true. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.